Argus's kit is actually really interesting as to how you build him and how you're going to be playing him, right? So first, we're going to go into the description of the abilities, then I'll give you guys the build that I found works best on him. Now, we're going to start off here with just simple on his passive. Now, his passive is actually really interesting because his passive basically encourages consistent damage over time as opposed to as max burst as possible in a short period. And I'll explain. So essentially, his abilities apply a stack. In this case, they're calling it disintegration. Each stack lasts 3 seconds. They do stack on top of each other. So the moment you get a second stack, it restarts the counter. It'll basically deal ability damage, and the math they give us here is 2 damage plus 1.5% of the total magical power that you've built as bonus magical damage. But each stack that you get going upward increases that damage by 40% of the stacks. Not the flat damage of the ability, just how much each stack is growing. So each stack is going to grow by 40% essentially, right? It is capped at 12 on jungle minions, so he's not going to be the best jungler. You're only going to be able to get 12 stacks on jungle minions. But if you're in a team fight, let's say you got a steal that's chasing you down or something, you're going to be able to stack it indefinitely. So you're going to see how that's going to lead into the build that I prefer on him. Well, let's start off here. His basic attack. Now, his basic attack, nothing crazy. He's going to be able to hit 1.4 times per second. So it's okay, you know, decent natural attack speed. His basic attack is going to deal 54 damage, and then it'll increase 60% bonus physical power, which is pretty normal. All basic attacks in the game are this way. The cool thing to mention about this basic attack is the fact that the animations, whenever he swings his staff around, the animation will come from a different direction, even though it's going to lead to the same spot. If that's not something that you're used to, get used to it visually because it might trip you up a little bit. Just make sure the crosshair is on the person. That's all you really got to go for. Then we have his primary ability, the Dread Nova. Now, he lobs an unstable orb of arcane energy is the way that they word it here, right? Basically, all he's doing is he's lobbing an orb. This orb is actually very easy to aim. It's got really, really good range on it. I would say this is probably your primary engage ability based on the matches that I've been doing on him. Upon landing, it explodes. It's going to deal flat damage. So starting at 85 power all the way to 185, and it scales 60% of your magical power. And it deals damage to all targets hit, and it stuns them. So not only do you get to do burst damage with this, but you also stun everybody. Now, a second ability, the Ether Crystal. Now, the Ether Crystal, he's going to summon an Ether Crystal at the target's location for 2 seconds. The crystal will produce a storm that deals anywhere from 20 to 60 flat power, scales 18% magical power, and it will do damage every half a second to nearby enemies and slow them by 40% every half a second. So not only is this an AoE ability that does damage over time, which helps out his stacks, but it also slows anybody in the AoE. Also, after the duration, the crystal explodes, or it implodes, excuse me, pulling all enemies within to the center. So essentially, the way this ability is going to work, long story short, is you can throw the ability. It's going to do damage over time, and if they're still in the ability, they're going to get pulled towards the center. And then we have his alternate ability, the Particle Shredder. Now, honestly, I think this is the bread and butter of his kit. I think a lot of people are going to be sleeping on this ability. Now, essentially, he's going to fire projectiles from his staff up to 3.5 seconds. So you're going to click it. You got 3.5 seconds. He's going to consume mana per orb that he throws. Each orb is going to do anywhere from 18 to 50 magical power plus 10% scaling of what you've built. So essentially, you burn mana to cast. Nothing crazy. Now, the crazy part about this ability is that when you max the ability, you're now no longer limited to those 3.5 seconds. Once you max this ability, you're able to literally hold the right mouse button, or I don't know the controller commands for it, sorry, but you're able to hold this ability infinitely. You're basically going to be consuming mana per shot, and you can stop shooting whenever you run out of mana. Now, essentially, be mindful, the longer you shoot this ability, the more your passive scales. So the longer you're in a fight, the longer you're casting this, and the longer you're holding it, the more damage you're doing per shot. So that's going to fall into play with the build that I'm going to suggest here for you guys that I found the best success with. Now, his ultimate is the Synaptic Obliterator. Basically, it says after a short delay, he channels an energy up to 8 seconds. So you have 8 seconds to cast these shots. He's going to be able to fire 3 orbs that are going to be able to pierce through terrain and can travel up to 5,000 units of distance. To give you a reference, the average range attack is about 15 to 1600 units of distance. So you can do the math there. You're going to be able to shoot this pretty far. The cleanest shot that I was able to land is you can hit somebody standing in the middle of their lane from being in mid-river, which is actually just a nuts distance to kind of surprise somebody on. Now, each beam is going to deal 90 to 170 plus 30% of the magical power you've been building. It scales 30%, and it'll be increased by up to 2.25 damage based on their missing health. So not only do you get 3 shots, not only does it scale off of the power that you're building, but the more health they're missing, the stronger the ability becomes. So basically, if you don't kill them with the first 2 shots, the 3rd shot is going to be doing max damage because you're going to have the most amount of health missing, considering that you've landed all of them. Each shot also slows the individual by 60% for half a second, which helps you line up that 2nd shot coming forward, or the 3rd shot. It's very good for basically securing kills that are at a distance. Imagine Murdoch snipe that doesn't reach as far and you get 3 shots, so to speak. Very cool. The enemy doesn't really see it coming. Very hard to counter, even though they can counter with like a shield or something like that, right? With a crest. But it's a super cool executability. Just be mindful when you do cast this, you're fully grounded. You can't move, and you are very susceptible to damage. Now, for example, a Grux can't pull you. You can't be CC'd out of this ability, but you can be damaged during this ability. So be very careful how or where you decide to cast, because if you're in the middle of a fight casting, you probably will get targeted because you're a setting duck, so to speak. Now, let me go ahead and show you guys how I prefer to engage with this kit and what I recommend. Okay, so as far as the wave clear for this character, I gotta say he probably has one of the best wave clears that I've seen in the game, arguably even better than Iggy and Scorch. Now, here's what you're gonna do as far as getting the best optimal wave clear for him. You're gonna initiate with his E, which is going to be his crystal. You're gonna initiate with his crystal. His crystal is gonna pull everybody towards the center, or all the minions towards the center, excuse me. Then you're gonna hit your orb, which does damage and stuns, and then you clean up with your RMB. By the way, I am showing it with the new Argus skin that they're releasing, which by far is probably one of the coolest skins I've ever seen on a character. Like, look, it moves, all the animations actually color change and everything. Super cool. Now, as far as how you engage on a hero, very similar fashion, but you're gonna have to stun a little bit sooner in order to keep them in. Because here's the thing, realistically, if I throw my crystal, even though they're slowed, there's enough time for them to either use a movement ability to escape, or there's enough time for somebody to be able to, quite frankly, walk out if they're not towards the center of it. Now, there's 2 things to pay attention to as far as this crystal goes. The first one is this little center circle that you see whenever you're casting it. If the enemy is in the center circle, it'll actually displace them. It'll push them away from the initial of the circle, upwards, away, depending on the situation, right? So one thing that you want to do, quite frankly, is position the crystal and behind them. Or let's say if Steel here is pathing to the right, I'm gonna go ahead and put it to the right of Steel. That way it's an object that he can't walk through. He's gonna run into it. Let me actually do this to make it a little bit easier. Probably should have done that earlier. So essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna place the crystal in the path that they're gonna walk through. Let's say, like, for example, if he's gonna walk through this corridor back here, I'm gonna place it to where he either has to walk towards my team or walk towards a corridor. And then you're gonna have a short window before it'll actually pull in. But for you to stop him from actually moving out of there, what I want you to do is I want you to cast the crystal, count 1 Mississippi, and then you're gonna stun him. And you'll see why. You're gonna do the crystal 1 Mississippi stun, and then he's forced to stay pulled in. You're gonna want to make sure that he gets pulled in and it gets exploded on for maximum damage. So, and then once that secondary explosion goes off, then you're gonna start with your RMB. Now, the fact that you can continue holding that RMB for the duration of the fight is absolutely insane, because it's all about ticks. You want to keep applying constant damage to people, right? The only time that you ever want to let go of that RMB, quite frankly, is gonna be if you see the enemies grouped up again and you find major, like let's say your cooldowns are back and you find major use in throwing your E and your Q and then your R&B again in order to kind of just keep the combo going. But as you can see, look at the damage numbers on the seal. The longer I hold it, the more damage it does per hit. And that's the beauty of this kit, essentially, and this build, because this build allows you to basically hold the R&B almost infinitely while doing as much damage as possible. So let's actually get into the build itself and why it's so beneficial. So here's going to be the overall idea of the build. The build is essentially, if RMB, if your alternate ability, the beams coming out of your staff consume mana, I'm trying to have as much mana and mana regen as possible. So essentially, the build is going to equal us having 3020 mana when we're maxed out on all capacities, while the fact that we're regenning a ton of it, and I'll explain as we go. So first item, let's actually start off with our crest. Our crest is going to be the Time Flux Band. Now, it'll give you 25 magical power, 200 mana, which helps out our build in the end game. 8 magical penetration, flat pen, which flat pen is always better early when people have less armor, and then percentage bend is better late whenever people are actually building armor items and such. And we do have percentage bend here in the middle of the build, and we'll go into that in a second. But essentially, your active is called Turntable. You're going to activate it. It's going to mark the spot that you're at. You're going to be able to move. You get 20% increased movement speed for 4 seconds. After those 4 seconds, you're going to teleport backwards to that original spot where you activated it, and it's going to reset all your basic ability cooldowns. I'll explain why this is going to be so clutch on Argus. You're going to be able to activate it, mark the spot that we're in. We're going to go in, activate our crystal, activate our stun, start our stacks, so to speak, right? We're going to be able to initiate a big team fight because those are big AoEs that we're activating. And then from there, it'll teleport us back 4 seconds into a safe distance that now we're going to be able to free cast. And that way you can initiate the fight for your team, but you don't have to be tanking all that damage for your team. Our first item is going to be Azure Core. Azure Core is going to give us 60 magical power, 350 mana, which again helps out our max mana so we don't run out of mana as quickly, and 15 ability haste, so we're able to cast a little bit faster. All our abilities chain stuff closer together, which again increases our stacks. Now, the passive for this ability is called Font. When you kill any unit, you're going to gain 5 max mana, again increasing our mana pool all the way up to 400 additional mana. So this one item can give us a total of 750 mana realistically when you're done stacking. Once you reach max stacks with this item, you're going to be able to convert 3.5% of your total mana gets converted into magical power. I don't like the way that it's worded here. I know they have this whole new bullet point system. I feel like this needs a little bit more detail to explain that one. But yeah, so 3.5% of our max mana gets converted into magical power. So the more mana we build, the more damage we do. And this is a max mana build, so to speak, right? Now, let's go ahead and go into item number 2. Now, item number 2 is going to be Orb of Enlightenment. Now, Orb of Enlightenment is going to give us 55 magical power. It's going to give us 250 health, 250 mana, again, raising our mana pool, and 5 ability haste. But for each hero level that you gain, you're going to gain 2 magical power, 10 health, 15 mana, and 1 ability haste. So the longer the game goes on, the more we grow our base stats, specifically our mana, which means that we're getting more damage. Don't forget. And then Art of Fortitude, every ability cast is going to restore 3% of your missing health. So essentially, you're healing yourself a little bit by constantly casting. So that's going to be one cool thing that this whole build is basically, it's encouraging you to cast constantly while you're also getting health back as you're casting. Now, be mindful, this doesn't stack with your RMB, the constant infinite shooting, you are going to have to let go and recast in order to heal, so don't get confused there. But the constant ability casting will slowly regen your missing health over time. So it's all about staying in the back, being as distant as possible, and just free casting your abilities and getting as that health back, while simultaneously you don't really have to worry about running out of mana with this build. Because item number 3, Caustica. Now, Caustica gives us 70 flat magical power, nothing crazy there, but a good amount. The most important part, it's now 3 items in, it's going to give us 40% magic armor penetration, which, like we said, flat pen was good early, our crest gives us a little bit there, percentage pen is better late game. So that way we cover both sides in case somebody's building magic armor against you. But most importantly, the second passive, Arcane Resolve. When you're below 50% mana, you're going to gain 1% of your max mana as mana regen. So essentially, the more max mana you have, the more mana regen you get. And this basically gets to the point that late game, late build, you can hold that RMP and you basically will not run out of mana. You will see how insane of a combo this is, because you just get to abuse and spam and just kind of go all out shooting. Now, our fourth item is going to be Megacosm. Now, Megacosm, it comes in clutch for a couple of reasons. Now, it's going to give us a 75 magical power, going to give us 250 mana, again, increasing our max mana pool, and it's going to give us 15 ability haste, so we can cast more consistently. The 2 passives are going to be Disintegrate. When you deal ability damage, you're going to deal 3% of their max health as additional damage over 3 seconds. Additional applications just refresh the duration. And then the second passive, on dealing ability damage to heroes, deal 4% of their bonus health as additional damage. So essentially, you're going to deal damage based off of their health bar, which helps against big health bar targets, let's say like a Sevarog. But if anybody's building bonus health, which a lot of junglers, a lot of solo laners like to do, or let's say, for example, a mid laner that's building Orb of Enlightenment, this will actually be good against them also. If they have a health-based build, you're going to deal damage based off of the health that they're building additionally on top also. So it's very good at just basically melting down sustain targets. And you're going to have the additional damage towards the increased health bars that some people prefer to build as opposed to armor. Now, our last item is going to be Oblivion Crown. Now, Oblivion Crown, basically it's a must on any mage if you're planning on doing item. Essentially here, we're going to have 120 magical power. Flat gives us the most flat power that in the game. While the first passive, it's going to increase all of our magical power by 15%, being mindful that your passive is already infinitely scaling all your ability damage. So now you're getting even more ability damage scaling added to everything. And your second passive is actually on a 30-second cooldown. Ability damage to the hero deals another 10% of their current health as magical damage. So essentially every 30 seconds, you're going to be able to chunk 10% of somebody else's health, right? Being mindful, 30 seconds is a lot of time. Usually most team fights are done by then. So if you do have it ready, please be mindful that you want to use that stack either on somebody that's got a big health bar that you can melt quickly, or if you see a carry with full HP, the moment you touch them with one ability, that's an additional 10% that's already melted, and you melt that carry even faster, because now you only got to melt 90% of their actual health bar with the rest of your damage.